I am Kael'thara Veng Sol Kir, third blade of the Threshold Concordance, sworn daughter of the eternal choir, that my people do not walk upon worlds. We descend. We arrive in silence, in symmetry, in the certainty that lesser civilizations will kneel before the choir's harmony or be unmade by it. That is the law of ascension. That is the song I was born to sing. Earth was meant to be the final. Note in a minor chord. Our seers had watched your transmissions for centuries. The wars. The waste, the screaming static of your radios. Primitive, fractured, ripe for absorption. The High Cantorate decreed that the threshold would offer the choice. Submit to the choir's neural lattice and live forever in perfect order, or refuse and be erased as discord. I believed in the choice the way lungs believe in air. So I came alone. As tradition demands for first contact with a pre-threshold species. My descent pod carved a perfect spiral of ionized air above the endless red desert you call the Australian Outback. The ground below was a cracked, bleeding wound of ochre and rust, littered with the bones of your machines, rusted trucks, shattered aircraft, the detritus of some tribal war that had devoured itself years ago. The silence, when my pod settled, was absolute. Even the wind held its breath. I stepped out in full ceremonial armor, living obsidian that drank the sunlight, the sigils of the choir glowing cold cobalt across my skin. My crest 3 silver blades rising from my spine caught. The sun like frozen lightning. I expected emissaries, scientists, soldiers in neat ranks. Instead, a single human walked toward me across the salt pan. She was young by your standards. Perhaps 25 cycles, clad in mismatched armor, hammered together from scrap metal and sun-bleached cloth. A scarf of faded crimson hid the lower half of her face. Dust streaked her skin like war paint. A long rifle rested easy across her shoulders, but her hands were open, casual, almost lazy. No honor guard. No translation protocol. No awe. She stopped 10 paces away, tilted her head, and spoke in a language my implants rendered as flat, colloquial English. Gee, Chinese. You lost? The words themselves were harmless. The tone was not. It was the tone of someone who had seen gods before and buried most of them. I answered in the high cant, letting the harmonics resonate in the air, so the meaning would imprint directly on her primitive cortex. I am the voice of the threshold. Your species has been weighed and found discordant. Kneel and be elevated. Refuse and be silenced. She scratched her nose through the scarf. Yeah, mate. Heard that one before. I felt the first fracture in certainty then, thin as a hairline crack in crystal. No fear scent. No dilation of pupils. No tremor in the heartbeat. My armor tasted through the air. Only curiosity. And something colder underneath. Before I could formulate the ritual rebuke, a sound shattered the silence. A child's scream. Thin and bright as breaking glass. From behind an overturned fuel tanker. A boy no older than 8 stumbled into the open. Barefoot, sunburned, clutching a rusted tin cup like a talisman. Behind him, the ground CONVULSED. Landmine. Old war stock. Pressure plate half buried under drifting sand. The boy froze when he saw it. One small foot already descending. Time dilated the way it does in combat trance. I saw everything at once. The plate depressing, the firing pin rising, the chain reaction that would bloom into a sphere of superheated copper and steel, shredding organic tissue within a 15-meter radius. I calculated blast radius, shrapnel vectors. The precise millisecond when the boy's mass would be rendered into red mist. My armor could have saved him. A single kinetic lance from my gauntlet would fling him clear. But the law is absolute. We do not intervene in the fate of pre-threshold young. To do so would taint the choice. The species must demonstrate worthiness collectively. Not through individual sentiment. I stood rooted. Centuries of doctrine locking my limbs. Like iron. The human woman did not hesitate. She ran. Not in the elegant bounding strides my people train for vacuum combat. She sprinted like something feral, knees high, elbows slicing air. Scarf ripping free to reveal a mouth set in a snarl that was almost a grin. 10 meters. 8. 5. The boy looked up, saw her coming, and in that instant understood. She dove. Her body folded over his like a closing wing, shoulders slamming him sideways, arms wrapping him tight against her chest plate. They rolled together across the salt in a tangle of limbs and dust. The mine detonated. I saw it in perfect, terrible clarity, the flash white, then orange, the pressure wave rippling outward, bending the air like heat haze. Shrapnel, jagged teeth of rusted steel spinning end over end. One piece, half a drive sprocket, rusted into a dagger, caught the woman full in the back as she shielded the boy. It punched through scavenged armor, through flesh, through the spine, and burst out the front in a spray of red. She did not scream. She landed on her side. The boy beneath her, blood already pooling beneath them both. The boy was crying. But unhurt, she was not. I stood in the ringing aftermath. The choir's perfect harmonics suddenly sour in my skull. The woman pushed herself up on one elbow. Blood poured from her mouth in a steady stream, bright against the dust. She looked at the boy, ruffled his hair with a trembling hand, and rasped, "Run home, little thief." "Tell your mum," I said, "she still owes me that beer." The boy ran. She turned her head slowly, as if it weighed 1,000 tons, and looked at me. Not with hatred, not with triumph, with something ancient and exhausted and fiercely alive. "You lot," she coughed, pink froth bubbling at her lips. "Always think the song's about you." Then she smiled small, crooked, utterly human, and died. The silence that followed was not the silence of reverence. It was the silence that comes after a gunshot in a cathedral. I knelt beside her body without thinking. My gaunted fingers brushed the ruin of her back where the metal had torn through. Warm, still warm, something broke open inside my chest. A cavity I did not know existed. The choir's perfect lattice suddenly felt like a cage. I had come to offer ascension or annihilation. She had paid a price I was forbidden to pay. For a child whose name she might not even have known. In that moment I understood the terrible truth the high cantorate had never sung. Humans are not discordant because they fight. They are discordant because they will die. For nothing. For a stranger. For a story. For the simple, insane refusal to let the universe win. That is not chaos. That is a force more absolute than any law I have ever obeyed. I stood. The desert wind scoured the blood from my armor, but not from my mind. I opened a quantum channel to the choir's flagship in high orbit, the one waiting for my signal to begin planetary harmonization. "Third Blade Veng Sol Kier reporting," I said, and my voice did not waver. "Mission parameters have changed. The species designated Terra Sol has achieved threshold transcendence by unconventional metric. Recommend immediate suspension of choice protocol. Recommend. Alliance." A pause. Then the cantorate's voice, layered with 1,000 throats. "Clarify. Third Blade. Transcendence without lattice integration is impossible." I looked down at the woman's body, at the small smile still clinging to her bloodied mouth. "No," I said softly. "It is not." I severed the channel before they could object. Later, when the boy led others back, wary scavengers with rifles and sunburned eyes, I did not raise my crest in threat. I knelt again, this time in the dust, and placed my ceremonial blade across my forearms in the gesture of binding oath. "I am Kael'thara Veng Sol Kier." I told them, "Your sister saved a life today at the cost of her own. By the blood debt of my people, I am hers now." and through her yours. One of them, an older woman with a scar across her throat, looked at the dead girl, then at me, then at the sky where the threshold ships waited like silent judges. Finally she nodded. Once the wind kept blowing, carrying away the smell of blood and burnt metal. I will never sing the choir song the same way again, because now I know another music raw, broken, defiant, and more alive than any harmony. I was taught to worship. Humanity is not ready for the stars. The stars should be terrified of humanity. And I, Kael'thara Veng Solkir, third blade no longer, will stand between them and you for as long as I breathe. That is the price. That is the song worth singing.